So the latest PIAC report is out, the Public Interest and Accountability Committee report on the petroleum sector. Makes for very interesting reading. And the reason why this has to be discussed, obviously, because of where we are as an economy. The petroleum sector is a sector that contributes significant amounts to our revenue pool. But there are challenges that PIAC is flagging that we need to talk about. A few numbers tell the story. One of the numbers that tell the story is 32.5%. What is that? We are talking about the decline in production of oil in the last 4 years. For the 4 years consecutively, we've had a decline in production, up to 32.5%. That, for a lot of watchers, is alarming. And this has implications then, obviously, for how much is coming in to the kitty. And again, this number also gives you a clearer sense of it. We're talking about 25.65%, the decline in petroleum revenue in that 4-year period. Again, you're looking at 2022 to 2023. That is a very important number to pay attention to. You don't want to lose this amount in an economy like ours. You want that. But to have that, then you must ensure that production, that pipeline is there, is open and constantly running. But as we're seeing with this PIAC report, that is not what we're seeing. Another number that shows another picture, tells another picture, is this number here, which for me is also very important to observe, 13.42%. And again, what are we talking about? The decline in the crude oil revenue allocated to the GNPC. Obviously, GNPC stake in the many oil blocks that we have is the stake that we all have, right? So when an international oil company comes in Ghana, automatically GNPC will take us 10%. And that 10% is for us. And so if obviously we have a reduction in production, that will mean revenue decline. And if revenue declines, the amount of money that goes to the GNPC will also decline. So these arrows in red pointing downwards aren't good. Aren't good for anybody. Aren't good for this particular economy at this particular time. And we will look at why this is happening, but also how do you fix it. Now, I want to break it down for you a bit more and look and tell you the trend we've seen over the last 4 years that PIAC has been monitoring the production numbers. And so let me go to my other screen here just to illustrate that point. And you see the bars there telling you the production numbers. So if you go all the way back to 2019, for example, we're doing okay. The highest in the last 4 years is 71 million barrels per day is what we're producing. 75 million barrels in all is what we're producing. But then the decline we've seen over the period all the way down to 48 million barrels. That is very consistent and very steep. You look at that red line, that is how much you've lost in terms of the volumes you produce in this country. And in the oil production, volume is everything. The more you produce, the more money you get. Of course, that is also dependent on the world crude price that is available at the time that you peg your production around, but it hasn't been good into the production. We'll look at why this is the case. And so you look at the revenues, for example, that is coming in between that period there. The highest we've seen in 2022, where we're talking about $1.4 billion. Again, pause for a second and think about what that would mean for this economy, considering that we're going to the IMF for $3 billion. And then we dropped now to just $1 billion. Thereabout. So again, that is something you don't want to see. But that graph there tells a story. And then we also look at what the monies are being used for. Now, why is this concerning? Because you look at the district assembly, they're spending a chunk of this on goods and services, which is a breach of the regulations and the directives, by the way, because they should not spend more than 30% on goods and services. Spend it in areas that will yield returns for the economy. We're talking about investment. And yet we're spending the opposite. We're doing the opposite when it comes to this particular area. That's another key thing that the PIAC report is highlighting for us to pay attention to. Every now and then we need to look at the petroleum sector. And it's important because of its potential to be a game changer in helping us deal with this GDP challenge, but also the economic challenges that we face if you manage it properly. You know, we, over the years, also have this regime where after every 3 years, you are allowed to change the priority areas and where you spend the oil revenues, right? We've done that recently in 2023, and we decided that we're going to be focusing on agriculture, we're going to be focusing on infrastructure, road and rail, and industrialization. And if you see the allocations that has been made to each of these priority areas, it tells a story. So you, for example, see that rail had 99% of that, 99.21%, which is good. That's why you've seen the new trains coming. Part of that is being financed, obviously, by the oil revenue, the monies that we are getting from there. The railways minister was here last month talking to us about that, and we're all excited about it. Of course, if you take away the accident that happened, it is good to invest in that. And then you talk about the 74% that we put on infrastructure, the roads, education, the health, agriculture, very important, 73%. But PIAC raises a concern about industrialization. You've prioritized it, but you're not spending enough money on there. And that is fundamentally one that will change the structure of the economy and lessen the pressure on the city. But you're not spending much there. PIAC is recommending that government takes a look at that. And then another number that is big for us to watch, $954.5 million. This is almost $1 billion. What's that number? Ghana Gas. Ghana Gas is Ghana Gas owes GNPC significant amount of money. This is what we're talking about, right? Receivables at that time. Well, that is rather the figure I'm talking about. The receivables that they're supposed to get, but aren't coming in. I'll show you those who owe it, by the way. And there's a whole host of things that aren't coming in. But why is this though? These are amounts that must come, but aren't coming. And Ghana Gas is doing business. They need the money to come in. And then you look at the Ghana Gas itself is indebtedness to GNPC, which again is also quite high, 604. It has implications also. So we see this indebtedness, somebody's not paying, because state-to-state dealings, right, is part of the reason why this is the case. And you put the figures to it there, the Jubilee Oil Holdings too, you're not putting monies into the Petroleum Holding Fund, although they should. They didn't do it in 2023, and PIAC is flagging it again, that again, it happened again, that needs to be corrected. So a few things that they are recommending. Development and production, of course, is key. It continues to be a significantly high in the 10 fields, which is a factor. They're looking at Ghana Gas continuous rise in indebtedness to GNPC, another part of the problem. But this is a cash waterfall problem. ECG2 is in there somehow that needs to be fixed. So the recommendations are quite a lot. Let's unpack them a bit more with my guests. And we'll start from the top, looking at the declining production, why that is, and how do you fix it. My guests will join me for a conversation right after this. And thanks for staying with us here on PM Express. It's always brought to you by Syntex Tanks. It is strong, it is tough. If you want a tank to store your water that will last, it's durable, and they also have warranty, 7 years. In fact, nobody else has that. And they can also make it bespoke for you. Just call them with your size and preference, and they'll deliver. 0244-335-168 or shop online at syntexgh.com. My guest joining me for a conversation tonight, Mark Ajiman, is a technical manager at the Public Interest and Accountability Committee, joins me in the studio. Dr. Steve Mateo is a co-chair of the Ghana Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative. In fact, he used to be at PIAC. When you were there, right?
Yeah,
when he was there. Yeah, he was the chair of PIAC, and so he knows a lot about this conversation. And I want to also bring in John Jinapo. He's a ranking member of Parliament's Committee on Energy. And I'm delighted that he can join me because he used to be the Deputy Energy Minister at some point. So he understands what it takes to attract investors and to get the pipeline of projects you require to ensure that you have a proper petroleum industry. I want to start with you, Mark, because the big picture from your report, as far as I'm concerned, is this 4 years consecutive production decline. Why is that happening?
Yeah, good evening to you, Evans, and good evening to your viewers. It's quite appreciative to be here. We kind of appreciate the relationship we have with the media. So PIAC has been sounding this warning, especially since our first bidding and licensing round in 2018-2019, that production is declining. So there's a part the government has to play. There's a part industry players also have to play.
Why is it declining, though?
It is declining because there are two main reasons. One, operational issues. Jubilee started production in November, December 2010. And it is 12, 13 years into its production life. It's projected that Jubilee has a lifespan of, say, 25. Yes, it used to be 30 years, now it's about 25 years. Now it's more like halfway through its production life. So you naturally expect that Jubilee will decline because reservoir pressure is being depleted. So they have to kind of adopt artificial measures, either gas injection, water injection, and the likes to bring on stream more oil. 10 is basically, it started just recently. 10 is basically technical challenges. In fact, in 2023, the operators, that's Talo, actually reported to PIAC that basically is due to technical challenges which they are working around the clock to address. Now, Sankofa Ginyame is predominantly a gas field. Oil is associated with the gas. So you produce more gas than oil. So it is usually expected that oil production from Sankofa Ginyame will be lower than 10 and Jubilee. So that is the operational challenges. Now, when it comes to the regulatory, more or less, and the governance challenges, it looks like we've not learned much lessons from the first licensing round. PIAC, in collaboration with CSOs in the space, actually brought out a paper after monitoring the whole process that there are one or two issues that led to the unsuccessful nature of the bidding rounds. One was that the data represented was of low quality data, 2D data, where industry players, if they acquire that data, they have to spend extra money to process that data, bring it up to either 3D or 4D. So they shied away from that. The second one was that the sizes of blocks offered were very small. In fact, super majors, so in the industry, when we say super majors, we are talking about Shell, ExxonMobil, BP, Chevron, Total. These are the super majors. So they actually say that, look, the sizes of blocks given to them are very small because we are talking of ultra deep waters. You know, we start with salt pond field, which was shallow water, then we move to deep water, and then now we are in ultra deep water. So they were saying that, look, the sizes of blocks are very small. Should increase the sizes of blocks so their investment will be worthwhile. We did not pay attention to this. We've gone on roadshows as a country, led by the Energy Ministry. We've gone to South Africa, we've gone to Norway, we've gone to OTC in Houston with the same kind of data, with the same kind of block sizes. Definitely, and with this energy transition on our neck, you will likely not be able to attract the right kind of investment into the space. So, since 2018, we have not signed any new petroleum agreement. In fact, 4 companies have their petroleum agreements have been abrogated or terminated over that period that we are talking of. You've not brought on stream new companies. You've not brought on stream new production fields. So definitely you expect that.
It will decline over time.
Production will decline with time.
Mr. Junapo, you were there at the Energy Ministry. Is this a policy problem? Is this governance? Where do you put this blame? Hello, Mr. Junapo, can you hear me? If you can unmute, please. Okay. Hello, Mr. Junapo, can you hear me? Okay, would get his attention. But I have Dr. Steve Matial with me. Doug, I hope you can hear me.
Hear you.
Great. Doug, this is a matter that I've heard you talk about before. And I must confess, years back, you warned that we'll face this decline. But to learn that we, 4 consecutive years, we've declined on the way where we are now in the 40 million barrels. It's quite alarming. For you, where do you put the issue in terms of why we're seeing this decline, and how long before we run out of oil with existing fields that we have?
Well, thank you very much, Evans. The trend actually speaks to 2 things. First is that our oil fields are peaking. And as Mark Ajiman indicated, the last time I checked, we've actually produced about half of Jubilee. We've done about a third of 10 and about a quarter of SGN, Sankofa Jiname. And so if we don't add to our reserves, in a matter of 10 to 15 years, we will have no oil industry. I know GNPC has been making efforts at attracting investments into our oil industry, but the investments have not been forthcoming. Sometimes I feel we are even just throwing money down the drain. They are not coming, the investments are not coming for obvious reasons. First, we had ExxonMobil that exited our oil industry, and their main reason was the sizes of our blocks and the quantum of find they made. If we had bigger blocks, then they have better prospects of finding oil and in the right quantities. That would get them to sleep. The other reason, which we infer from our last bidding round, has to do with the data quality. We do not have adequate data and in the right quality to be able to attract investors. This the Ministry of Energy is aware. I recall when Mohamed Amin Adam, the current Minister for Finance, was at the ministry, he admitted that indeed they needed to do something about the quality of data we have. But we haven't done much about it, and so it wouldn't be the time that we'll be able to attract the right kind of investments. Then the oil companies themselves, those who are here, because for a new entrant, they will definitely undertake some risk analysis. And in doing so, they will be talking to the players in the country. And indeed, they do talk to them. There's been a major concern about regulatory unpredictability, where every year we change the rules. We introduce new fiscal items, which then disrupts the financial planning of these companies in country. Again, there's been the complaint about the application of our rules rather capriciously. And so I think these are matters that are known to the government.
But Dr. Matia, what about the stability clauses that the IOCs have?
Exactly. A lot of them complain that in spite of the fact that they have stability clauses, whenever we introduce new rules, we enforce it on them. I know a lot of them have resisted and continue to resist, but it creates a certain discomfort for them, and therefore deters their appetite for investments. So these are matters that the authorities are aware of. There's a third leg, which has to do with the fact that currently we are in an era of energy transition, where most of the developed countries and the major oil companies are beginning to divest their interest from fossil fuel into renewable energy. Within the EU, for instance, a program has been introduced dubbed taxonomy, the EU taxonomy program, which seeks to discourage investments in fossil fuel and encourage investments in renewable energy. And so, for instance, if you went to the EU to do road shows, chances are that you will come home empty-handed. And indeed, that has been the case in some of the roadshows that have been embarked upon by the GNPC. So time has come for us to rethink. And I think the immediate thing we could do is to provide some regulatory predictability to those in country. I think there's so much antagonism in the sector. Currently, as we speak, my information is that the ENI managing director has relocated from Ghana to Cote d'Ivoire because there is a threat of he being arrested.
Why?
For supposed contempt of court. And so you find that currently ENI has prioritized its operational activities and investments in La Cote d'Ivoire just because of the controversy or the dispute they have with Springfield. I think the earlier we settle this matter, the better it will be for the country in getting ENI, because currently they are the biggest player in Ghana's oil industry. So it's a myriad of things that have come to stall some of the activities in our oil industry and resulted in the decline that we are seeing currently.
And fascinating insight indeed. And that ENI one, it's definitely one that rings a bell and strikes a chord. John Junapo is a ranking on the Energy Committee in Parliament. He's back on the line now. Mr. Junapo, so your other panelists have been articulating the reasons why we've seen this 4 years consecutive decline in the volumes of production, but the signs were there way before this trend really began. In fact, as PIAC had noted, the last time we signed a PA was in 2018. Now, from where you sit as the ranking on the committee, have you received any briefing on this particular subject and assurances? And I know you meet some of the players in the sector. Where would you put the blame? Is it the fiscal regime that isn't responsive to current trends and realities, or the government side that is just simply obstinate, not responding to the global trends that are changing?
First of all, may I know whether my sound is okay?
Loud and clear, yes.
Okay, I'm far away in Bole, so kindly bear with me. It's not very stable, but I'll try my best. And let me thank Dr. Mantiel and my other colleague. I think they virtually laid a foundation. The truth is that Ghana is seen as a hostile investment destination. I was at OTC recently, and in most of the meetings you attend, when you introduce yourself as coming from Ghana, the first question they ask is, what is happening in Ghana? If you talk to the investor community, nobody wants to deal with Ghana. That's the truth. I mean, it's the honest truth. Like Dr. Mantia said, ENI has a major challenge with Ghana, not just ENI, even Tullow. Tullow is threatening to go to international arbitration over what they term as creeping tax regimes that goes against their fiscal regime. The petroleum sector is very, very competitive. Recently, Guyana has made some huge discoveries. Everybody is going there. We were far ahead of Cote d'Ivoire. It's not just ENI's country director that is relocated to Cote d'Ivoire. Most of the service companies are relocating to Cote d'Ivoire. And what they do is that they move from Cote d'Ivoire, come offshore, do whatever they have to do, and go back to Cote d'Ivoire. And so we are losing our competitive edge, and that is very, very worrying. In 2019, we peaked at about 197,000 barrels per day. Today, we are doing about 138,000 barrels per day. In 2019, we produced about 71 million barrels of oil. Today, we are doing just about 50 million. From 2019 to date, oil has declined by more than 32%. And so the stark reality is that we're having a major, major challenge. There's been no additional oil field since 2017 thereabout. I can check the data, but what I'm saying is that we haven't added anything apart from the 3 main producing oil fields that the NPP inherited. There's been no new oil fields. Apart from the 3 FPSOs, there's been no new FPSO. But the worrying thing is that the big boys are exiting Ghana. And in the oil sector, they communicate among themselves. Once one big industry leaves, it has a certain follow-up effect. And so AGM is left, and Adako is left. ExxonMobil kept complaining that the acreage is too small. They are in deep water. And so don't subject them to the same level as those in shallow water. That did not happen. ExxonMobil has exited. And most of these companies are going to our neighbors. And so Ghana is losing out big time. And I'm very, very worried as a Ghanaian and as a member of parliament. At the rate at which the oil is declining, very soon it may not even be commercially productive or prudent, because you must first break even. In the short run, if your cost of production is higher.
Okay, we may have lost him there. He warned us that he's far away in Bali, so we expected that to happen. And Steve, I want to continue with you on that point. You've diagnosed a problem. PIAC has diagnosed a problem. So we know this, and it's been predicted. Why haven't we fixed it? What's the problem?
I'm sorry, I'm back.
Okay, yes. Yeah, you're making a point.
I get it.
Yeah.
Let me apologize to you guys.
No problem.
Like I said, the oil industry is very uncertain. And like Doctor said, you have fiscal regimes. People want a certain level of predictability, a certain level of certainty, so that they can do long-term planning. But when you keep changing your fiscal regime in terms of taxes, requirements, permits, and all that, it's very expensive to drill a well. Sometimes it costs you like $50 million. You drill a well and you hit a dry well, and that is gone. So you need these big boys who have a huge, deep pocket in terms of financial resources, but also the technology. Because in this modern era, technology counts a lot. Sometimes they don't even drill a well. They put some mappings together and determine whether it's worth it. So I think that going forward, we must change our posture. And that must come from the executive. The oil industry sees the current executive as too belligerent, as too combative. Yes, we want the best for this country. But we're in an oil transition era, energy transition. I mean, people are moving away. So this is the time to drill whatever oil we have. But more importantly is the gas. In 2022, because of import substitution from gas as against light crude oil, this country saved $1.2 billion. Annually, if you do 3 years, that is $3.6 billion. It's more than what the IMF is giving you with other conditionalities. In terms of savings, because we haven't added anything and demand is increased, now we're importing light crude oil. So my worry is not even the crude oil. It's the gas that we need to power our thermal plants in order to stay competitive. So I will plead with the president, first of all, that he should show leadership. He should call all these oil industry players, not just the oil producers, call a big conference and state that Ghana is charting a new path and that we believe in dialogue. Springfield ought to be protected. ENI ought to be protected. What leadership does is to sit these two parties down and find an amicable solution. And where you are willing to do that, you would find an amicable solution. When we begin to do these little things, and the oil industry begins to realize that Ghana is friendly, I'm sure we may attract some level of investment. Because the only way to stay afloat is to explore, appraise, and produce. If we don't do that, we'll lose out big time within this short period.
I mean, Steve Mathieu, you agree with that assessment as to what we need to be doing now? Hello, Dr. Mathieu.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Good. Yes, I perfectly agree with the Honorable Member of Parliament. What I'll add is that we currently are pretending to be doing something about it without fixing the real problem. So if you look at the number of roadshows GNPC and the ministry has undertaken in the last 3 years, you look at the cost expended and look at the returns from the roadshows, the conclusion you come to is that we've thrown money down the drain. We cannot attract investments through road shows if we don't fix the fundamental problems in the industry, which is review the sizes of the blocks, make them bigger to increase the chances of a find, invest a bit more in the geophysical data, I mean, through seismic studies and all that, to improve the data quality, which then increases the chances of a find. These are things that industry has raised, and I think those are the starting points if we want to make any headway in
Must we change the fiscal regime, make it more attractive and competitive?
Yes, because time is not on our side. And if we are not able to quickly attract investments into the industry, our oil in the ground, and I mean those that we are yet to explore and exploit, will become stranded. They'll become of no use when the whole world moves away from fossil fuel to renewable energy. So there's some urgency, and we need to take another look at our fiscals and make sure that compared to our neighbors, they are good enough to attract the investments. But more importantly, and I came by this when I developed the energy transition position paper for the Ghana upstream petroleum industry. The common concern of the industry today is regulatory predictability. Some of them were even of the view that it would not even give them fiscal incentives, but at least they can have some predictability in the fiscal regime, because tomorrow they wake up and government has introduced a new national development levy, and then it throws off all their numbers. And so what they want is some predictability and also some, how do I put it? To move away from that capricious approaches in trying to apply regulatory instruments. Because they think that, and like Honorable Jinapor said, they think that our regulatory institution sometimes is too high-handed and doesn't make them comfortable operating here. I think we need to engage and come to some common accommodation in terms of what the issues are and how to amicably resolve them.
Mark, I need to ask you, I mean, we talk about this, but how long before we run out completely? If this trend continues?
If this trend continues, the next 10 to 15 years, we should run out if we don't bring new production on board.
Is government listening, though? Because you've been flagging this every year. It's now 4 years consecutively that you've done this. And the decline is very sharp now. Yes. Very, very sharp.
Yes.
It almost as if every year the drop it's even steeper than the previous year.
Yes.
You are PIAC.
Yes.
You engage the finance ministry.
Yes.
Are they listening?
Yes, they are listening, but the energy ministry is concerned about the kind of money needed to kind of invest in the geophysical data. The data currently sits with the Petroleum Commission. And I just wanted to just respond to, more like buttress on the point Dr. Mantiao made. You see, you can just change the fiscal regimes, but then consistently since 2011, when we started receiving petroleum revenue, we've realized that it is the carried and participating interest
that brings in more money.
So you focus your attention on participating fully in the operations, but then with the mind that you will always respond to the cash cost that's needed to participate.
But we don't have the cash to put in when the call is made.
No, if we want to participate fully, we have the cash. If we want to, we have the cash. Dr. Mantiao and Honorable Jinapor can attest to this. If we want to participate fully, we have the cash. You dedicate cash to that venture, you understand? Because the law says that GNPC, being our commercial arm, leads our operations in the industry.
Are you happy now with the way GNPC is running? It's been a recurring theme in your reports. Have you seen improvements?
Our problem with the allowing or commanding GNPC to undertake quasi-fiscal expenditure. That is our problem.
Have they improved?
GNPC, from our end, no. Yes, 2023, they did well by retrieving about $60 million from bust. But that has not stopped the government authorizing GNPC to undertake quasi-fiscal expenditure. If you look at the Western Corridor gas infrastructure project, it was conceived as the baby of the Ministry of Finance, but was given to GNPC to finance. That is not the responsibility of GNPC. If you speak to GNPC on air right now, they'll tell you that it's part of kind of streamlining the activities, making sure that the activities doesn't encounter any hindrances, making free flow of their activities. But Evans, you and I know that it is the responsibility of government through the budgeting process to make provisions for some of these things. And if you speak to GNPC today, they will tell you that they expect government to pay them back the money they've spent. The Western Corridor, it's not only GNPC that has spent money in the Western Corridor project. Even Ghana Gas, that's receiving so low from the cash waterfall mechanism, and also much to GNPC is also constructing infrastructure projects in the enclave. Yes.
I mean, and you mentioned the carried and participating interest.
Yes.
And if we really want to improve our earnings in the stake, then that's where we need to go. Yeah. And that's also part of the big picture, Mr. Junapo. I remember your time, you were to introduce Exploco. The whole idea then was a commercial arm that goes in there, uses it to probably become an operator. And it become even more imperative now because the impending energy transition. Because if you don't develop the muscle to do it yourself, the problem we are talking about may get worse and not better, right? What's the big picture there in terms of, he's telling me still that PIAC is still seeing that, yeah, they talk to the ministry, but they say they need the funds to do this. How big a problem is that? And is it part of the solution?
So you prioritize. And like you said, if you prioritize, then you can increase your stake. When this government took over, they decided to sideline Exploco, went and formed another new company entirely in an offshore enclave. And you remember the fight we had with them, and started paying petroleum revenues into an account other than the Petroleum Holding Fund.
You're talking about the Jubilee Holding?
More than 2 years.
The Jubilee Holding?
Yes.
Or the material?
Yes, GOHL, yeah. GOHL. And even PIAC in their reports flagged that it was illegal, and yet government will not listen. So I think that I'll plead with this government. You know, one entity, one person, one government cannot know it all. And so sometimes when civil society and opposition, PIAC, and the rest also raises issues, let's engage so we can build this nation. There are some short-term solutions that we can get. For instance, if we engage ENI positively, we can ramp up gas within 3 months. Yeah. And I think that is what we should be looking at. It's a low-hanging fruit. Tullow is requiring some guarantee in order to produce 100 mm scrap. That will make us even a net exporter of gas. So even without further exploration and looking for money, there are some low-hanging fruits that we can easily assess. But it's about how we engage. And you know, human beings are human. When you engage positively, and sometimes you go behind the scenes and engage shareholders, they make the decision. They would find Ghana favorable. But when we remain hostile and continue with this attitude, we're going to have a major problem. We've been doing some calculation. If you take the legacy debt, you take gas debt, you take the amount in terms of the LC that we have overdrawn with the World Bank, and all of them, the current energy sector debt is about $3 billion. That's a huge amount. And this sends a very negative feed to the international community. So I would plead with government, let's step back, re-engage, consult further, and chart a new path. You may not even need to give them some juicy deals. Just being consistent, being predictable, and demonstrating good faith, you may turn the clock around. I mean, other than that, from where we are going, The thing about carried and participating interest is that you pay cash calls.
Yeah.
Unlike surface rental and royalties, which is like the money that comes to you. Carried and participating interest, the more you take, the more you also pay. And category A would always take some of the money. So if we can encourage them to produce more, and even with a lower royalty, your revenue is a function of quantity and price. So if the quantities are increasing, you'll make more revenue.
I mean, Mark, he mentioned JOHL, the Jubilee Oil Holding Limited. You flagged something in your report that for 2 years in a row, they failed to pay what they received into the Petroleum Holding Fund, amounting to some 304 million. Where's that money then?
Yeah, the 343 million US dollars is beyond a 2-year period. So, as Honorable Jinapor said, JOHL was established by Anadaku when they wanted to sell their shares.
Yeah, we took the shares, we bought the shares. Was it 7%?
Yes, 7%. But you see, the Petroleum Revenue Management Act clearly states that the state has the first right of refusal. And GNPC, acting on behalf of the state, was leading the process. The state, in taking a decision whether to buy or not, GNPC borrowed money from the Ministry of Finance and used to purchase the shares. So in that process of the state taking a decision or not, Anadaku decided to set up an offshore company in the Cayman Islands, that's JOHL, and give the shares, the 7% shares, to JOHL. We bought the shares with the hope that GNPC would take the full controlling effect of the shares. They didn't. They made JOHL, that was set up by Anadaku, a subsidiary. And when that subsidiary started lifted, you see, what most Ghanaians don't know is that the first lifting or the first 2 liftings by JOHL, to me, and that's a personal view, was illegal. Because the Petroleum Exploration and Production Act, Act 919, clearly states that a company that should engage in petroleum activities in Ghana should be registered in Ghana. At that time, JOHL was not registered in Ghana. It was registered in the Cayman Islands. JOHL was registered in Ghana in August of the year. So they made their first liftings, got their first proceeds without being registered in Ghana till PIAC made noise about it. You understand, Evans? Then that money was not deposited in the PHF. Now, PIAC is standing on Section 6 and Section 7 of the PRM, which clearly states that, to summarize it, which clearly states that the direct and indirect participation of the state, revenue accruing from that participation, should be lodged in the Petroleum Holding Fund.
So 343 million is outstanding.
Yes.
So where is the money?
The money, GNPC has directed JOHL to spend part of the money on other ventures. The rest, JOHL, which as at December 2023, the shares has been transferred to GNPC Esploco. The Esploco, Honorable Jinapor was talking about. Currently, as we speak, the shares has been transferred to Esploco. JOHL, in the correct sense of the word, does not exist anymore. Now we have Esploco. And now Esploco will be lifting, and GNPC consider Esploco as a subsidiary, and they will treat the liftings and the revenue derived out of it as that of, like the way they've treated that of JOHL. And it will not come into the Petroleum Holding Fund, which is the PHF, which PIAC disagrees because it is an indirect participation of the state. And Evans, you and I know that when the funds come to the PHF, GNPC still gets its share. The ABFA will get its share, and the Ghana Petroleum Funds, which is the Stabilization and the Heritage Fund, will still get its share. But the GNPC is saying that they kind of incorporated JOHL under the Companies Act, and the Companies Act makes JOHL more like an independent body.
So they shouldn't.
That should not be dictated by the provisions of PRMA.
Okay.
That's why we disagree with.
And I want to wrap up now with on this subject with Dr. Simantia. Dr. Simantia, how do you propose this is dealt with, considering PIAC's position? And you were once the chair. I presume you agree with the position on this GOHL liftings that amount to 343 million that hasn't been paid into the PHF, that they demanding that they should be paid into the Petroleum Holding Fund?
Yes, Evans. And I, at the same time, understand the behavior of GNPC. It is wrong, though, but they've always complained that they need to be able to generate enough resources to be able to fend for themselves into the distant future. And so one of the things that they've been seeking from government is to be given what they call revenue recognition in their books. So at one point, they sold a consignment of crude oil on behalf of the Republic and deposited the money in their own account prior to transferring it into the Petroleum Holding Fund. The Ministry of Finance instructed them to bring the money into the Petroleum Holding Fund without delay, and they complied. But since then, they've been complaining. And so this is a clever way they found to achieve that revenue recognition. But let's first understand that the 7% stake that became available accrued to the country as the sovereign owner of the petroleum resources of this country. It is on the basis of that that we exercise our right of preemption. Now, so the 7% accrued to the state. It shouldn't be GNPC buying it. It should be the state providing resources to buy the 7% and then hand over the 7% to GNPC, which is our commercial representative in the industry. And therefore, when that happens, then whatever is earned in respect of the 7% goes directly into the PHF. But what happened? Without recourse to Parliament, the Minister of Finance granted GNPC a loan, a right it did not have. And there have been instances where GNPC has also granted the ministry loans. And I think Mark Ajima made reference to that, the Western Corridor project, where some $60 million was taken from GNPC. Monies that were not refunded on grounds that GNPC was supposed to have been capped and was not capped over a period, and therefore they were instructed to expunge that money from their books. That particular transaction was not covered by any documentation.
I see.
And so it's a passed relationship, ad hoc and sometimes seemingly informal relationship between GNPC and the state is not good for good governance. Well, and so for me, there are issues to be addressed. I still find it problematic that we sometimes appoint political persons or politically exposed persons to head GNPC and at the same time get a politically exposed person to chair its board. It creates a certain convenience that could lead to decisions being taken not necessarily in the interest of the state, but in the interest of party.
Yeah, and that is that is an important point. Except that the latest appointment, the chief executive now, is an industry technical person who is known very different from what we've used in the past, and so the expectation is that things should be different. PIAC endorses that approach, right?
Oh yeah. Yes.
Joe Dadzi is known in the industry.
Joe is an industry person.
Yes.
He understands how to play around it.
Absolutely. Anyway, thank you very much, gentlemen. This is a conversation we'll return to. This is all industry, and the prediction is almost 15 years down the line. We may run out if this trend continues. Enjoy the rest of the evening.